Good evening and welcome to the final live Scotland at 7 of 2020. My name's Kenny McBride. Once again, we have no guests in the studio tonight. We are just bringing you a bulletin. So we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,364,675 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 1,239,844 were confirmed negative, 124,831 were positive. There were 2,045 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly 43 new reported deaths. This will be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will show symptoms, and not everyone will necessarily get tested. As always, we urge you, if you are showing symptoms of a new, dry, persistent cough, a fever, or a change in your sense of taste or smell, please do book a test as soon as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,133 people were in hospital last night, 69 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 4,510. This number only includes those who have died in hospital, having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures published today show that 72,548 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 981 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And the top story this evening, the UK government's damaging Brexit trade deal does not have the consent of the Scottish Parliament. MSPs backed the Scottish Government's legislative consent memorandum, which says the deal will have a severe detrimental impact on Scotland and that leaving the EU is a mistake of historic significance. The Constitutional Convention is that the Westminster Parliament should not legislate in devolved areas without the Scottish Parliament's consent, and the UK government's trade deal affects multiple areas of devolved responsibility. While the trade deal has been given consent at Westminster, the Scottish Parliament vote underlined that Scotland did not vote for Brexit, nor leaving the single market and customs union, and losing the many benefits that membership of the European Union brings. Scottish Government modelling estimates that a deal of this type a deal of the type that has been agreed could cut Scotland's GDP by around 6.1%, or around £9 billion in cash terms by 2030, compared to EU membership. The economy and businesses will face the impacts of the higher costs of trying to access EU markets, while justice and security cooperation will also be seriously affected. Scotland and its students will no longer be able to participate in Erasmus, and reduced EU migration will also have a significant negative impact on the economy, on population levels, and on wider society and culture. Far from having substantial increased opportunities in the future, it will also mean a fall in the quantity of some key fishing stocks landed by the Scottish fleet. Meanwhile, at Westminster, the SNP has said independence is now the only way to protect Scotland's place in Europe, after Westminster voted to impose Boris Johnson's Brexit deal against Scotland's will. Despite Scotland voting overwhelmingly to remain in the EU, every attempt by the Scottish Government to secure Scotland's place in the single market and customs union, and a majority of Scotland's MPs voting against Boris Johnson's deal, Scotland has been completely ignored by Westminster throughout the Brexit process, and now faces a devastating hard Brexit. Analysis shows Boris Johnson's hard Brexit deal will do long-term damage to the economy. One study estimates that Scotland has already lost £3.94 billion. 17 consecutive polls have shown a sustained majority for independence in Scotland. The most recent poll, published by Savanta Comres on the 17th of December, had support for independence at a record high of 58%. The Oxford University AstraZeneca vaccine has been approved by the UK medicines regulator, raising hopes that immunisation against COVID-19 could be increased within days, using a single jab in order to get as many vulnerable people protected as possible. The approval of the vaccine by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Authority, the MHRA, after weeks of examining trial data, was greeted with excitement and relief by experts. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine already in use needs to be stored at minus 70 degrees centigrade and is hard to deploy. The Oxford vaccine, however, only needs normal refrigeration at 2 to 8 degrees and is easily transported from UK factories, meaning it will not have to be kept in central hospital and community hubs, enabling a swift rollout to GP practices and care homes. The vaccination programme in Scotland will start on the 4th of January, and the First Minister said in her COVID statement today that she intends that over 50s will be vaccinated by the spring. Members of the public are being urged to protect each other and the NHS by staying home this Hogmanay to suppress the coronavirus. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has asked the nation to stick with it and keep looking after each other to ensure a safe start to 2021. During a statement to Parliament, the First Minister also wished the country a brighter and happier new year, although she warned we must remain vigilant during the difficult winter weeks ahead. She said, "As this awful year draws to a close, let me again thank everyone across Scotland for your sacrifice and patience and for looking out for each other. We have every reason to believe that the spring of 2021 will bring better times, but we must first get through these difficult few weeks of winter. We know our prospects for the rest of the year will be better if we get off to a safe start, so let's stick with it and keep looking after each other. And let me wish everyone when it comes a better, brighter and happier new year." The SNP has said no one in Scotland can ever trust a word the Tories say again, as the full extent of Tory lies and broken promises is exposed ahead of the vote on Boris Johnson's hard Brexit deal. Publishing new research on 10 of the biggest Brexit lies told by Boris Johnson and Scottish Tory MPs, Kirsten Oswald MP said the Tories are guilty of a pack of lies, false claims and broken promises, which have now been utterly exposed by the devastating reality of Brexit. The Tory lies and broken promises include false claims that the UK's participation in Erasmus would be protected, that there would be no special deal for Northern Ireland and no checks at that border. The UK would have complete control over fishing. The UK would be safer and more secure outside the EU. That VAT would be scrapped on energy bills. That working people would be better off and wages would be higher. That red tape would be cut. That the UK would have an extra £350 million a week to spend on the NHS. And that voting against independence would protect Scotland's EU membership. The SNP's Westminster Deputy Leader said the hard Tory Brexit deal would cause long-term damage to the economy at the worst possible time, and said the only way to protect Scotland's interests and place in Europe is to become an independent country. The SNP is urging the UK government to introduce a work permit for musicians and other artists so they can tour around Europe without having to apply for an individual visa for each country they visit in the bloc. A petition launched by artist Tim Brennan has already surpassed the 100,000 signatures needed to secure a debate in the House of Commons. The Brexit deal agreed between the UK and the EU provides exemptions to visa rules for a number of workers travelling to different European countries, but does not include artists and musicians, meaning many will have to apply for separate visas for each individual country they visit whilst touring in Europe. Many fear this will drastically increase the cost of touring. SNP MP and former keyboard player in Runrig and Big Country, Pete Wishart, has said the only way artists can regain the full benefits of being part of the EU is in an independent Scotland. At least 7 people have been killed and dozens injured after a strong earthquake hit central Croatia, destroying buildings and sending panicked people fleeing into rubble-covered streets in a town southeast of the capital, Zagreb. The European Mediterranean Seismological Centre said an earthquake of 6.4 magnitude hit 28 miles from Zagreb at 12:19 at a depth of 10 kilometres. Initial reports said the earthquake caused extensive damage, causing roofs, building facades and entire buildings to collapse. Croatia's Prime Minister, Andrej Plenković, said this evening that 7 victims had been found so far and there would probably be more. Plenković and other government ministers arrived in Petrinja after the earthquake. The biggest part of central Petrinja is in a red zone, which means that most of the buildings are not usable, Plenković said. As a Mediterranean country, Croatia is prone to earthquakes, but big quakes are rare. The last strong one struck in the 1990s when the Adriatic town of Ston was badly damaged by a 6.0 magnitude quake. The regional TV channel N1 reported live earlier today from Petrinja that a collapsed building had fallen on a car. Footage showed firefighters trying to remove the debris to reach the vehicle buried underneath. A man and a small boy were eventually rescued. The Balkan region lies on major fault lines and sees regular earthquakes. Zagreb is still rebuilding from a 5.3 magnitude quake that struck in March, the most powerful to hit the capital in decades. In the United States, Donald Trump's pardon of 4 American men convicted of killing Iraqi civilians while working as contractors in 2007 violated US obligations under international law, United Nations human rights experts have said. Nicholas Slatton was convicted of first-degree murder, and Paul Slough, Evan Liberty, and Dustin Herd were convicted of voluntary and attempted manslaughter over an incident in which US contractors opened fire in busy traffic in a Baghdad square, killing 14 unarmed Iraqi civilians. The 4 contractors, who worked for the private security firm Blackwater, owned by the brother of Trump's education secretary, were included in a wave of pre-Christmas pardons announced by the White House. Pardoning the Blackwater contractors is an affront to justice and to the victims of the Nisour Square massacre and their families, said Jelena Aparic, the chair of the UN Working Group on the Use of Mercenaries. The group said the Geneva Conventions oblige states to hold war criminals accountable for their crimes, even when they are acting as private contractors. These pardons violate US obligations under international law, and more broadly undermine humanitarian law and human rights at a global level, it said. Also in the US, one of the Louisville police officers who shot black emergency medical technician Breonna Taylor and the officers that prepared the warrant for the botched raid during which she was killed were told today that the department planned to fire them. Taylor's death, when police entered her apartment in Louisville, Kentucky, early on March the 13th, was one of a string of killings of African Americans that fueled mass protest demonstrations across the US during 2020. Taylor's boyfriend, who was with her when police burst into the home, fired once at what he said he believed were intruders. 3 police officers responded with 32 shots, 6 of which struck Taylor, killing her. Lawyers for Detective Miles Cosgrove, one of the officers who shot Taylor, and Detective Joshua Janes, who prepared the search warrant, said in a statement quoted by the New York Times that each had received notices of termination. Cosgrove and Janes had been on administrative reassignment during the investigation, according to the report. Janes' pre-termination letter from Interim Chief Yvette Gentry accused him of breaching department policies around truthfulness and preparing for a warrant's execution, according to the Washington Post. And the number of drink driving convictions in Scotland has halved since 2007, latest figures have revealed. According to National Statistics Scotland, the number of convictions for driving under the influence has dropped by 51%, from 7,820 in 2007 to 3,558 in 2018-19. In that time, the SNP government has cracked down on drink driving and ensured there are more police on the roads. Commenting, SNP MSP Annabel Ewing said, "Scotland's tough stance on drink driving has paid off year after year, with offences dropping by 51% since 2007. The campaigns we have led are having a real impact and making drivers think twice before getting behind the wheel. The Scottish public have also played a big part in this by considering how their actions can not only impact their driving ability, but also how alcohol will impact the people around them. We may not be able to see our loved ones as much this festive season, but I would still urge everyone to consider their actions if you're intending on having a tipple to celebrate." And I think everyone here at Broadcasting Scotland would certainly echo that message. So that is all we have for you for this evening. Tomorrow evening, Gordon and I will be here in the studio to talk about the second half of the year. If you didn't already hear us talking about January to June of this year, you can find that in our archives. So do please go and have a look. If you want to remember everything that's happened this year, we would understand if you don't though. But before we go, we do have to make one final appeal. If you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up there as a supporter. As we always say, and we thank you very much for all the support you have given us through the year, but it's only through your donations that Broadcasting Scotland can keep going and keep producing these shows for you. So if you're able to support us in any way, please do. You can also, of course, support our crowdfunder. We're using that to try and raise money to employ some staff next year. Of course, it's going to be a big year politically. We have a Scottish election, and we may also be looking at a Scottish referendum at some point later in the year. So if you're able and willing to support that with a one-off donation, you can go to broadcastingscotland.scot/donate. If you're not able to support us financially, we do absolutely understand. The shows will always be free to view online, and you are always most welcome as a viewer. But if you would like to help in other ways, then you can certainly help by following our social media. If you follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, you can like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on the Amazon Fire Stick, and then use those to then share these shows around with your friends and your family. Let people know why you think Broadcasting Scotland is important and why you think it's worth their viewership. That's by far the best way for us to grow our audience, and it's only by growing our audience that we can continue to grow and develop into a bigger, better broadcaster for Scotland. And finally, we mentioned that crowdfunder in order to employ some staff, but we do also need volunteers, and we need those all over the country, especially for covering that election. We want to have somebody at every count across the country. So if you're interested in getting involved in that way or in any other way here at Broadcasting Scotland, please do get in touch with us through our website. We would love to hear you. We think that would be quite a wee New Year's resolution for you to make, to get more involved in improving the media in Scotland. But that is all we have time for this evening. So thank you once again for joining us this evening and throughout the year. As I said, tomorrow at 7 you will be able to hear from Gordon and I as we discuss the second half of the year. We recorded that this afternoon, and it was very interesting to look back at all the things that have happened this year. It has been quite a year, and it has been a pleasure for me to be involved here at Broadcasting Scotland, bringing you the news, even though we've not always been able to have guests in the studio. We've had some challenges to meet, but it has been a real pleasure. So thank you very much for being with us throughout the year. A good new year to all of you from all of us here at Broadcasting Scotland. Thanks for joining us, and have a great evening. Good night.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.